Records and an ABC7 source, this is the home of Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao, and we have learned that this home was raided by the FBI earlier this morning. We're told that this happened just before.
On paper, it was a charity fund, emergency housing, youth outreach, disaster relief, clean money moving through clean accounts, signed off by people with clean reputations. But before sunrise, FBI and DEA agents were cutting through the side gate of the Los Angeles mayor's mansion. By 6:40 a.m., 42 people were in custody. By noon, federal prosecutors were staring at a seizure list that read like something out of a cartel ledger. $350 million. And the strangest part was not the money. It was where they found the first key. Not in a safe, not in a drawer, but taped underneath a framed photo of the mayor shaking hands with a school principal. That key opened a room nobody on the mansion staff admitted existed. And inside that room, federal agents found the first sign that this was not just corruption. It was a system. The raid began quietly in Hancock Park, one of the most guarded neighborhoods in Los Angeles. No sirens, no press line, no warning. Just black SUVs rolling through empty streets while the city was still half asleep. At the center of it all was Mayor Jonathan Vail, a politician whose public image had been built on crisis management. He was the man who showed up after wildfires, the man who visited shelters after storms, the man who stood in front of cameras promising to clean up Los Angeles. For years, Vail's team sold him as the mayor who understood the city's pain. But federal agents believed something else. They believed the pain had become profitable. The first warrant was executed at 4:58 a.m. The second hit a warehouse near Vernon. The third hit a private security office in Glendale. Then came raids in Long Beach, Van Nuys, Inglewood, and a downtown accounting firm that had handled municipal contracts for more than a decade. But the mansion was the headline. Because when agents entered the property, they were not just looking for documents. They were looking for a connection. A bridge between City Hall, narcotics distribution, offshore accounts, and a housing fund that had somehow moved hundreds of millions of dollars without triggering public alarm. The official announcement came later. FBI, DEA, DOJ, IRS criminal investigation. 42 arrests across Southern California. $350 million in cash, assets, crypto wallets, luxury vehicles, shell company holdings, and seized accounts. But the public version was only the surface. The case had started 11 months earlier with something much smaller. A missing shipment. Not drugs, not weapons, not cash, medical supplies. A nonprofit called New Harbor Relief had reported that 4 pallets of emergency-grade medical kits had vanished from a city-approved storage site near the port of Los Angeles. On paper, the loss was minor. Insurance handled it. The city moved on. But a DEA analyst noticed something strange. The storage site was not registered to New Harbor Relief. It was controlled by a logistics company that also appeared in 3 separate drug trafficking investigations. That company had no employees listed. No fleet. No real office. Just a mailing address in a strip mall in Bellflower and a rotating list of managers who seemed to disappear every 6 months. At first, investigators thought New Harbor Relief had been used as a cover by traffickers. Then they saw the invoices. New Harbor Relief had received $68 million in city-backed emergency housing contracts over 2 years. Most of the money was supposed to fund temporary shelters, food distribution, addiction recovery services, and medical outreach. But the payments kept moving. From the nonprofit to consulting firms. From consulting firms to real estate trusts. From real estate trusts to private security vendors. Then to crypto exchanges, luxury brokers, and offshore accounts in Belize, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. Every answer raised a worse question. Why was a homeless outreach fund paying a company that bought armored vehicles? Why was a youth rehabilitation grant linked to a DEA-tracked warehouse? And why did 3 of the vendors have direct access credentials to restricted city buildings? The FBI opened a public corruption probe. The DEA opened a narcotics finance probe. And when IRS investigators began tracing the accounts, they found something that changed the tone of the case entirely. The money was not being stolen randomly. It was being routed with discipline. Someone understood audits. Someone understood city procurement. Someone understood how to make dirty money look like public service. By month 3, the investigation had a name. Operation Glass Tower. Because the system looked transparent from the outside. But from inside, everything was distorted. The early anomaly came from a woman named Marisol Vega. She was not a criminal. She was a caseworker at a temporary housing facility in South Los Angeles. For months, Marisol had been logging complaints from residents who said food deliveries never arrived, medical teams skipped appointments, and security guards showed up only when inspectors were coming. The official records told a different story. According to the files, the facility was fully staffed. Meals were delivered daily. Doctors visited twice a week. Security was present around the clock. But Marisol kept photos. Empty refrigerators, locked supply cabinets, residents sleeping under torn plastic sheets while the city was billed for climate-controlled rooms. One night, a man at the shelter handed her a folded delivery receipt. It showed a shipment of blankets, medical kits, and hygiene packs. Signed, approved, paid. Except the delivery address was not the shelter. It was a warehouse in Vernon. That receipt became the first human thread in a financial machine. Federal agents later discovered that hundreds of aid shipments were being diverted before they ever reached the people they were meant to help. Some supplies were resold, some were used to pad invoices, and some shipments were used as cover for narcotics movement through legitimate transport routes. The system was elegant in the worst way. Trucks marked as emergency relief were rarely searched. Drivers had city credentials. Paperwork moved faster when it carried the language of crisis. And somewhere above it all, someone kept approving expansions. More contracts. More emergency authorizations. More money. At City Hall, Mayor Vail denied knowing anything about vendor misconduct. His office called the early reports administrative irregularities. But investigators already had wiretaps, and one intercepted call made them freeze. A logistics coordinator in Long Beach was recorded saying, "Don't worry about the audit. The House already signed off." At first, agents thought the House meant City Hall. Then they realized it meant something else. The mansion. The mayor's private residence had become a checkpoint. Not for policy, for payments. The first cinematic break in the case came during a trash pull outside a Glendale security firm. At 2:13 a.m., agents watched a janitor roll 3 black bags into an alley. Inside one bag were shredded documents. Inside another were burner phones snapped in half. But inside the third was a visitor badge. Gold trim. Embossed seal. Executive residence access. The date on the badge matched a night when Mayor Vail had publicly claimed to be at a private donor dinner in Beverly Hills. Security footage later showed 6 people entering the mansion's rear service entrance that same night. One of them was a DEA target named Arturo Salcedo. Salcedo was not a street-level trafficker. He was a broker. The kind of man who never touched product, never shouted orders, and never stayed in one city long enough to become easy to track. His specialty was logistics, ports, warehouses, drivers, paperwork. And now, according to federal investigators, he had access to the mayor's residence. That was the moment the case stopped looking like bribery. It started looking like partnership. But the mid-twist came from an unexpected place. The mayor might not have been the mastermind. For months, agents had centered Vail as the anchor. He had the access. He had the political power. He had the public image. But the financial routing told a different story. The same initials kept appearing in encrypted notes recovered from phones. EC. At first, investigators assumed EC was a cartel contact. Then they matched the initials to Elena Cross, the mayor's chief policy strategist. To the public, Cross was nearly invisible. She rarely gave interviews. She avoided cameras. She stood behind the mayor at press conferences, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. Inside City Hall, she was known as the person who got things done. Contracts moved when Cross wanted them moved. Department heads returned her calls first. Grant language changed after she reviewed it. And unlike the mayor, Elena Cross had a background that made federal agents uneasy. Before politics, she worked in crisis procurement. Before that, private intelligence. Before that, a consulting firm that had been investigated for laundering disaster relief funds after hurricanes on the Gulf Coast. No charges. No headlines. Just a trail of companies that collapsed right before auditors arrived. When FBI analysts built a timeline, the pattern became sharp. The suspicious contracts did not begin when Vail became mayor. They began 3 weeks after Elena Cross joined his campaign, then expanded after she moved into the administration, then exploded after Los Angeles declared a series of emergency housing initiatives. The public saw compassion. The system saw opportunity. Cross understood something most criminals never do. You do not need to hide money when you can bury it inside urgency. A crisis moves faster than oversight. A city under pressure approves exceptions. A mayor under praise signs what is put in front of him. But that still left one question. Was Vail a participant or a puppet? The answer came inside the hidden room. When agents entered the mansion, a staff member insisted the east corridor ended at a linen closet. But behind stacked towels, an FBI technician noticed fresh paint around a section of molding. A thermal scan showed heat behind the wall. An agent pressed along the paneling until the latch clicked. The wall opened inward. Inside was a narrow room lined with acoustic foam. No windows. No decorations. Just a table, 2 monitors, a shred bin, a locked cabinet, and a server rack humming softly in the dark. That server rack became the heart of the case. Forensic teams later recovered deleted files showing spreadsheets of payment schedules, coded vendor names, donor list, and asset transfers. One folder was labeled Civic Continuity. Inside were scanned approvals bearing the mayor's signature. But another folder was more damaging. It contained voice memos, not from the mayor, from Elena Cross. In one recording, she walked someone through how to split a $12 million housing allocation across 5 vendors so no single payment triggered enhanced review. In another, she warned a contractor never to contact the mayor directly. "He signs the cover," she said. "I run the structure." That sentence changed everything. But it did not clear veil. Because agents also found photographs, cash deliveries inside the mansion garage, luxury watches catalogued by staff, a handwritten note from the mayor saying, "Keep ye protected until November." Federal prosecutors later argued that Vail may not have designed the machine, but he protected it, benefited from it, and allowed it to grow. The villain had been hiding behind the politician, and the politician had been hiding behind the city. As the deeper investigation unfolded, the network widened. A real estate developer in Santa Monica had allegedly used city grants to buy distressed buildings, then leased them back to nonprofits at inflated rates. A private security company in Inglewood allegedly billed for guards who did not exist. A recovery center in the San Fernando Valley allegedly enrolled fake patients and used their identities to justify federal reimbursements. A shipping coordinator at the Port of Los Angeles allegedly cleared containers marked as relief supplies while moving narcotics through parallel routes. Every part had a role. The nonprofit created moral cover. The contractors moved invoices. The logistics firms moved goods. The security companies created intimidation. The political office created protection. And the mansion, according to investigators, became the quiet room where the system stayed aligned. Then came the second human story. A 19-year-old named Isaiah Reed had entered a city-funded recovery program after a fentanyl overdose in East Hollywood. His mother believed the program saved him. The city's website listed counselors, physicians, housing support, transportation, and job placement. But Isaiah later told investigators that half of the services never happened. He said residents were packed into overcrowded rooms while staff took photos during inspection visits and told them to smile. He said medication appointments were canceled. He said some residents were offered pills by men connected to the same security company that was supposed to protect them. When Isaiah tried to leave, he was told his bed had already been paid for 3 months in advance. That meant his name was not just a patient record. It was a billing unit. A person turned into a revenue stream. That was the human impact federal prosecutors leaned on when the case went public. This was not just money moving through shell companies. This was food that never reached shelters, medicine that disappeared from clinics, recovery beds that became invoices, public trust converted into private wealth. The final realization came from a document found in Elena Cross's personal safe at her Los Feliz home. It was not a ledger. It was a map, printed on thick paper, marked with colored pins and handwritten notes. Warehouses, shelters, city offices, donor properties, port routes, bank branches. At the bottom, written in black ink, were 4 words: control the emergency lane. That was the entire philosophy. Do not control the city. Control the lane everyone uses when the city is afraid. Because during an emergency, people stop asking normal questions. They ask how fast help can arrive. And if the wrong people control that answer, the money follows them. By the end of the week, the DOJ announced charges tied to racketeering, bribery, wire fraud, money laundering, narcotics trafficking support, obstruction, and conspiracy. 42 people were arrested. More were expected. The mayor resigned through a written statement, claiming he had been misled by senior staff and would fight the charges. Elena Cross said nothing. When cameras caught her leaving federal court in downtown Los Angeles, she did not look panicked. She looked annoyed. As if the system had failed her, not the other way around. But the seizure total kept growing. Cash from storage units in Burbank, crypto wallets tied to overseas exchanges, luxury vehicles registered under shell companies, real estate holdings connected to emergency housing vendors, art, watches, gold bars, and one sealed envelope found inside the mayoral mansion's hidden room. Inside was a list of names, not criminals, not contractors, potential replacements, people positioned to keep the machine alive if the mayor fell. That was the detail investigators feared most. Because it suggested the raid did not destroy the system. It interrupted it. For the public, the story was simple. A mansion raided. A mayor disgraced. $350 million seized. 42 arrests. But inside the investigation, the lesson was darker. The most dangerous criminal systems do not always look like gangs, cartels, or men whispering in back rooms. Sometimes they wear badges. Sometimes they hold press conferences. Sometimes they use words like relief, recovery, housing, safety, and reform. And sometimes the door to the whole operation is hidden behind a linen closet in the mayor's mansion. So the real question is not just how a system like this could exist. It is how many people had to look away for it to survive. Because if $350 million can move through trusted institutions before sunrise exposes it, what else is still moving in the dark? If this case